I do love Austin, but one of the drawbacks is oftentimes that Austin does not value its minoritized communities, its vulnerable communities, the people who they feel aren't really bringing in the money. They don't value them as much.
Profit interests.
They'll mess everybody over to make sure that Susie Q, who's coming in for ACL, has a good experience.
There's shuttles.
Yeah.
Free shuttles.
Yeah. And so I want an Austin that earnestly values those communities to the point where they're willing to protect them and listen to them. In the same way that whenever XYZ wealthier area is like, oh, we want to be protected from this, we don't want y'all to interact with us, and the city's like, okay. When this community is like, hey, I don't want you coming in and taking our houses from us, the city should be all like, we're going to actually hear you out on that, instead of being like, that sounds very NIMBY of you. I don't think you should say that. So that value is something that I really appreciate. And I think that having that on the base level could positively influence a lot of the other aspects that people want to come out of the interaction with the city.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode with DAWA Community Powered ATX. We're here with 2 extra guests.
Hey y'all, I'm Celine. I'm a volunteer with Community Powered ATX. I'm in place for Madi because she's out, but we really wanted to have this interview today. I've mainly been behind the scenes, helping with social media stuff or with the fellows that we've had. Today we have a really amazing guest, Folasade Fashina, and
Thank you for joining us.
yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Can you start by sharing a bit about your background?
Yeah, my name is Folasade. My pronouns are she, her. And I am from Austin. I know a lot of people like to refer to that as Austin native. I kind of on that kind of terminology, but I'm from Austin originally. My mom's side of the family is from Austin. My dad is Nigerian American. He was born in Nigeria and he came to the US for college. So I'm like 2 types of black is what I like to say to people. Background wise, I went to Manor High School. For those who know, I still am from Austin. I'm not from Manor. People try to claim that. I went to Howard University for undergrad. I have an undergrad in interdisciplinary studies with concentration in bioethics. So a lot of like really lofty thinking type of stuff. And then I have a master's degree in public health from the University of North Texas Health Science Center. And now I'm back in Austin after gaining all that knowledge and training so that I can be able to service my community. I work with a bunch of different organizations here, and I try to, get in where I fit in, make sure that I can help everyone that I can to the best of my ability. So.
Right. We'll definitely get into some of the work that you're doing with various organizations because I've seen you out here a lot and it's great to like bump into each other at events. So going back with kind of your background in public health and environmental work, can you share, growing up on the East Side, what were some of the health or environmental disparities that you've witnessed firsthand?
Yeah, so one of the biggest disparities is in pollution. Both in actual physical pollution and in sound pollution. So on the East Side, there's a lot of disregard for how certain things are going to impact the community that's over there. That basically leads to landfills being okay to be built on the East Side, or a lot of disposal of things from certain procedures that the city has done. They're comfortable doing that on the East Side. And then they're also comfortable with the gentrification, taking away of the houses, stuff like that. And then on the sound pollution side, I actually had so much sound pollution growing up that I got used to being in a very noisy neighborhood. I got used to hearing the helicopters. I got used to hearing the cars backfiring, the dogs barking, the people arguing. And now that I live in a quiet apartment, it makes me uncomfortable. Like when I get out of my car and nothing's happening and it's just silent, I'm like, what's wrong with these people? Somebody trying to kill me or something? There's that. And then on the other side, there's a lot of infrastructural disparity.
Right.
When I was actually in middle school, I was in National Junior Honor Society in 6th grade. I was the president for some reason. And one of the things that we tried to advocate around was getting sidewalks put in on Decker. Because down Decker Lane, there were no sidewalks, but a lot of the kids would walk to school from their neighborhoods.
Right.
Because Decker Elementary and Middle School are both just on Decker Lane. and kids were getting hit by cars.
Oh my God.
Non-children people were getting hit by cars, and the city didn't really care enough to do anything about it. And I say that specifically because the city did not actually go through with putting in sidewalks on Decker Lane until maybe when I was in undergrad. Mind you, we were advocating around that when I was in 6th grade. And it wasn't until maybe I was 20 that they actually started building the sidewalks, and they haven't finished them. They're the Texas-style sidewalks where it cuts off randomly at one point, or there's only a sidewalk on one side of the street, not the other side of the street. So that disparity happened as well. And then the last one, which I actually ended up doing a project on in my master's program, was this disparity in shade canopy. So where I grew up, there were not a lot of trees in general, but also there weren't a lot of shade causing trees. And so my neighborhood was very hot all the time. A lot of people wouldn't be walking around as much as you would see in a more affluent neighborhood because it was often too hot to do so. I think my house and then a couple of the other and then maybe 2 or 3 other houses in the entire neighborhood had trees that were big enough to possibly cast shade, but they were trees that were in the center of the front lawn, and so it wasn't casting shade over the sidewalk. It was casting shade over what was going on in our house, which is helpful for electricity bills, but not helpful for the greater community. So I think that those are the main areas of disparity that I witnessed as far as on the environmental public health side.
Yeah, I work in the climate environmental field, and it's not shocking, but it still feels kind of shocking of just how America was developed in all cities and how same communities, Black and brown communities, always get infrastructure neglect, and there's still issues that we still see today. So that's insane that on Gunter Road that they still don't have all the sidewalks in place to this day from when you were like a student in high school.
Yeah.
My second question is, was there a specific moment or experience that sparked your commitment to social justice work?
I'm sure if you ask my family, they would probably point to a moment that was earlier that I just can't remember off the top of my head. But I would say that one of the earliest moments was directly related to watching my Nana. She had, when I was maybe 12, around that time, she had to have a mitral valve replacement. And basically, your mitral valve is it's a valve inside your heart that's supposed to keep the blood from going back to the wrong part of the organ. And what the doctor said was that from when she was born, it was not completely closed. And so she was experiencing random fatigue because, for background, my Nana was a very athletic person. Even when I was young, she would go on her runs, she would lift her weights, she would make sure she was always fit. And then randomly, she started getting really, really tired walking up the 3 steps to get onto her porch. And so we went through a lot to try to figure out what it was. And the doctors claimed it was because of this heart issue that nobody knew about and that had just randomly started causing a problem. And so we trusted them. It's a doctor. Why would they lie about that is what we thought. She has the mitral valve replacement. And in my little brain, I'm like, I want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon so that I can help families just like you helped us. And I tell him, it was at the heart hospital, and I tell the physician, and he goes, maybe you should consider being a nurse.
Oh, no.
And then he tries to back it up with, because, as a physician, you have to get a lot of malpractice insurance, especially as a heart doctor, because people like to blame you for a lot of stuff, and you don't want to have to go through all that, was his claimed reasoning for why he said that. We all know why he actually said it, though. And I was motivated to still want to help people in that capacity. But then as time progressed, because they gave her a metal valve replacement, they had to prescribe her a drug called Coumadin, which keeps your blood from clotting because you don't want it to clot around that metal. And she ended up having excess bleeding, and it was backing up into her kidneys. And she would go to the doctor over and over and over, and they started labeling her as a hypochondriac. Even though they could see that there was blood in her urine, they were like, nah, you're just being dramatic. And so she stopped going to the doctor. And then at one point, she got up in the morning, early in the morning, and she tried to use the bathroom. There was blood. She was like, I'll just wait. She went back to sleep, woke up again, tried again. She couldn't use the bathroom at all. and she went to the doctor, and they ended up having to take her kidney because basically all the way back with that heart surgery, it wasn't necessary. And so she was taking this Coumadin that wasn't necessary, and it was causing adverse effects in her body. And because no one was getting to it as early as they possibly could have, it just continued to cause adverse effects. And so it caused long-term damage in that one kidney, and they had to take it. Now she only has one kidney. She also ended up finding out the reason that she was tired was just because she had been anemic her whole life, which was a really easy find. So I don't even know why the doctor went to that extra work of doing that surgery when you could have just, you still could have handled that. So witnessing that, I think, is the most impactful as far as pursuing public health as a guiding force. But there's been plenty of other things that I've been through throughout my life and witnessed throughout my life that have continued to push me to want to help people.
Right. One like awful doctor and just straight up racist to like tell you all those things, but also saying how he was an awful doctor in the first place because he obviously doesn't care about patients. Luckily, like as a family, it sounded like y'all navigated that, but that happens to so many people like everywhere. So I could see that this journey on like the public health that opened up so many other things that through school you're kind of seeing of like, oh wait, maybe this is why specific communities are like targeted or neglected and how systemic it all is. That's wild. I feel the same way when I studied environmental science. It just kind of revealed of like, oh, this is kind of why we're in the state that we're in. Yeah, talking about school and what you were pursuing with public health, how do your personal and professional experiences shape the way you approach advocacy work today?
So I'm guided a lot by what most professionals would label as just personal experiences. And this is because oftentimes in professional areas, it's very like a controlled area, and you don't get to witness as much depending on what discipline you're in. And so I'm guided by a lot of direct experiences of witnessing members of my family having to navigate certain systems. On my mom's side of the family, we have a good number of family members that have had to go through the prison system. I'm pretty sure I have a couple of cousins that are in prison right now. We have members of our family that have had to suffer through drug dependency, substance use disorder, and we've had to both be on the side of having to be the family member, witnessing the person that you love not be who they were before, and knowing that that's because of something that they had gone through that you may not have been aware of. And then also the side of trying to help other family members. For example, one of our family members has a kid. And so we had to kind of be there for him because he has to go through that thing of you're seeing your mom and you don't want to see your mom like that. And you also just want your mom to be there. Most kids just want their parents to just be there. And then I've also had the experience of kind of witnessing how certain people try to navigate different things. So growing up, going to Manor ISD, Manor's a country town. And so we have a lot of people who would probably identify as Republicans presently. And in the same vein, we also have a lot of people who are minorities. And so one experience that I had was there was a kid that I was in, there were multiple kids actually, but this one kid that I was in high school with, he is Mexican, but he had a Confederate flag belt buckle and a Confederate flag thing on his wallet and a Confederate flag on his truck. And I'm just sitting here like, they wouldn't have liked you. Like,
You're a joke.
You're identifying with people that hated you.
Right.
Even the people that also fly those flags right now also hate you. So, like, what's going on here? And I think that kind of helped me understand a little bit that some people aren't choosing to identify with these symbols because they completely understand them. They've been misled based off of things that they don't understand. And the last thing I think, so I was a gifted and talented kid when I was in grade school. And being in that area, I think I went in a direction that a lot of gifted kids sadly don't go in, where I was able to observe how teachers treated the non-gifted kids. And I didn't like that. I didn't appreciate that kids were written off as troubled children, and that was just it. We're just not going to do anything with them. They're just going to constantly be sent to the ISS, OSS, da. I didn't appreciate how, as a kid who benefited from these systems, how I could show up late and it's fine. I'm just going to get into class.
Yeah.
But this other kid shows up late and they have to go to OSS. And first of all, I just think it's silly to send people to suspend people for being late, because if your concern is that they're going to be that they're going to miss out on education,
making it worse.
Yeah,
That's
they're going to miss out on more class. It's byproducts of the same system. We're witnessing all these different areas in which those systems oppress different groups of people. Continuously had guided me when I was young, and then remembering those experiences and hearing about them from, I have a sibling who's a freshman in high school, hearing about some of that stuff from her, and then still seeing like the teachers on TikTok that be like, oh, the kids can't read. Knowing where that stuff comes from and seeing how it's still persisting and potentially getting worse continues to like motivate me in those areas.
Yeah.
Personally.
I see your point of view. Like, I see like people go to ISS just because they have food on them, just because like they're late, but like that's also like taking their time away from like actually learning what they have to learn from school.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that happened to me a lot growing up, because it was just me and my mom living together for some point in time, and she would leave to work like by 5 a.m. and then I would have to get on the bus, but I would miss it. But she worked really far, so she would take me to school late, and because I was late because of that with my mom, I would get in Saturday detention. But it's like I really am trying to be good in school. Like I don't think this is helping me like address some of the things that are just uniquely set up for me back home, right?
Right.
Your comment though about like the Hispanic or Latino kid with the conservative symbol,
The Confederate flag.
the Confederate flag,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
the Confederate flag. That's literally. So I was a military kid growing up. A lot of different experiences. That could be a whole other thing. But when I moved to Texas, I moved to San Antonio, and then I got bussed out to a school 30 minutes north, and I saw a lot of that. It was very like way more country, rural, way more like Confederate flag, camo wearing. And I think for me, like I was coming in like super into anime and like had purple hair, and I was like, oh my God, what did my parents just do to me? And it kind of just brought to my attention of just like, I feel like some people try to assimilate because they think they'll benefit with their friends from school or their people around them that look like that, or like maybe the conversations that are had. But I think it's still obviously something that probably happens. Like, I don't know, if your school, they're seeing like minority quote unquote students that subscribe to like harmful things at your parents or just your assimilation. So now we're gonna get into some current events, just some hot, topics and current events that are going on. I wanted to bring up that SNAP benefits have currently ended starting November 1st, and that's been like the huge buzz online. How does this like affect the work you do and the issues you care about?
So it affects the work that I do greatly, because a section of the organizations that I work with specifically service people who benefit greatly from SNAP. It also affects me personally because a lot of people that I love benefit greatly from SNAP. So on both ends, it is impactful. But on the work that I do, specifically with Queertopia, we service a lot of unhoused people. Our org primarily is to service LGBTQ plus unhoused people, but we also extend out to servicing some other vulnerable populations. For example, those that are living at Community First Village and those that are living at the encampment in St. John's. And both of those groups contain a good number of people who receive SNAP. And that was the only way they were able to eat. With the Community First Village, they couldn't actually use their SNAP in the stores that are on the site, which made it difficult for them to get food. But that's not necessarily being impacted by the SNAP being lapsed. On the St. John's side, we are starting a meal train this November.
Oh, nice.
Basically giving people the opportunity to contribute to helping the members of that community be able to eat. And so we give people 3 options from most involved to least involved. The most involved one is you can actually volunteer to provide meals for 1 day in November. That does require providing 50 meals because there are around 50 or so people that live in that encampment.
Right.
The second most involved one is you can actually just buy a gift card from a restaurant of your choosing on the website, and then they'll just provide the meals. And then the third one is you can just donate money and we can just figure out what to do with that.
Yeah.
That's going to feed them.
That helps.
But that's one of the main ways that we kind of had to, not necessarily scramble, but we had to figure out something really quickly on how these people were going to get food. On the other side, another org that I work with is Street Forum. And I'm the help desk person.
Right.
So if you ask a lot of the members of Street Forum, they're like, anytime they have a question for help desk, they're like, ask Folasade, she probably knows. And so at help desk, one of the main exports of the table is helping people apply for their SNAP applications. We have the physical ones, and then we fax them in for people. This past Sunday, we had people coming in droves to the table as soon as we got there. What's going to happen? Is my SNAP application going to go through? How am I going to get food? What's going on? And that's really concerning for me because a lot of these people already have enough to worry about. And they had this thing that was going to help them get one of the most basic necessities. And they were excited about that. And then it's just taken from them. And now they're back at not even square one, like square zero. And that can be really disheartening when you're in a situation like that. And I think that a lot of people fail to recognize how harmful that is. And they fail to care about it because a lot of people do need direct interaction to really have things click in their head. But those are the two ways that it's been directly impacting my work, being able to help people throughout this process.
Right. Yeah, food's like an immediate thing you have to figure out every day. When that's taken away, everything collapses.
You're currently involved with Street Forum and Queertopia, two mutual aid groups serving unhoused communities. What has that work taught you about the power of mutual aid and solidarity?
Yeah, so firstly, this is always a thing that I bring up whenever I talk about Queertopia and Street Forum, but most of the stuff that we do isn't actually mutual aid, just to be frank. Mutual aid is a word that just a term that gets used a lot because of the positive feelings it evokes for a lot of people. But a lot of times the work that people are describing isn't actually mutual aid because it lacks the mutuality that's necessity for mutual aid. What we do with Queertopia is primarily direct aid. So we provide
What you're saying.
resources for people. There's not really a necessity of reciprocity. Most people do provide resources for, as soon as they get them, they go on their way. I probably will never see you again. And that's cool. That's fine. Because I don't really have an expectation of you to have a mutuality with me on it. On the Street Forum side, I view Street Forum as more of a twofold type of organization. And so it's mutual aid in some capacities, and some capacities is direct aid.
Right.
So there are some unhoused people in our community that they just receive stuff from us, and that's it. And that's cool. There are some that actually end up volunteering with us and really like becoming a part of everything, and they provide mutuality in any way they can. Sometimes it's just in, hey, I'm gonna keep you company, I'm gonna hang out with you, something like that. I'm gonna help you move, something like that. And so one thing that it did teach me is what mutual aid really means and how mutual aid isn't the only way that you can positively impact your community without it being charity.
Yep.
And then another thing that it showed me about solidarity specifically is the real value of just listening to somebody. I knew how important that was, but I didn't realize like how far it extended, especially with a lot of unhoused people. Because if you notice, there are a lot of unhoused people that tend to not be lucid in certain moments. They've either had a mental break or they just have like a certain mental illness that's preventing them from really being present in that moment. And they'll come over and they'll tell you a story, and the story may not make any sense. The stuff they may be talking about may not even exist really. But it's the fact that you're just sitting there and giving them the respect of listening to their story, regardless of if it is coherent at all, that they really appreciate oftentimes. And that's the one thing that a lot of people don't give to unhoused people is that basic decency and that basic respect. What you'll often see in Austin and in cities that have much larger unhoused populations like New York or LA is that they'll bristle whenever like unhoused people come near them, even if they're just walking past them. Or
they're so uncomfortable.
Right. Or they'll ignore them completely. Like if someone's asking them something, they'll just look away, just ignore them. And I'm like, you can just tell them no.
Yeah.
Like most of the time they'll be fine with that, but that's rude for you to just like pretend like they're not there, pretend like they're not human.
And to like paternalize them.
Yeah.
Like to act like they don't know what's best for themselves, or like you said, giving them a one and going like, oh, I feel so good because I did that. But I'm like, did you even talk to this person?
Yeah.
And humanize them and treated them like they're a human.
Yeah, the paternalism is also really bad. I worked in some nonprofits, and you see it a lot with nonprofits because it's kind of how they run.
Memes of your
Yeah.
nonprofit
Yeah.
girl boss.
But even sometimes in what people think are mutual aid, or in people who are just engaging with house people, they do it a lot. So one of the main ways that you hear it is, oh, I'm not going to give them cash because they're just going to spend it on drugs or alcohol. Like you weren't going to spend it on drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
Not you, but somebody else.
On a vape.
Yeah.
On things that you don't need, but
Yeah.
you're using because you got to get through the day.
Yeah. And so they'll be like, oh, instead, I'm going to give them my half-eaten dinner from them. I'm like, would you like it if somebody gave you a half-eaten dinner? Like, come on now. That's a human. That's a person. They just because they're in a worse situation than you are doesn't mean that you can give them scraps. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I really love that you touched upon like, because we talk about this a lot and with community powered of like, what is the difference in like the spectrum of organizing, right? One of like providing direct services, but like you said, where's the mutual part of it, right? And I think a lot of what at least folks in our coalition have brought up is like doing political education, but also like how are we like trading like resources with each other? Like someone has a skill in this, can we teach more people to have that and then learn from each other? Because I think a lot of the folks as well in our collective network are people that are unhoused, are people that have already, you know, even before SNAP benefits became cut, have been just describing like these needs, right? But wanting to also like learn and be part of like the organizing strategic direction for a lot that we're doing. And it's not easy, right? Because I think what you were talking about, like SNAP being cut, like y'all were already kind of like what it sounds like doing a lot, like over capacity. And now there's this massive capacity that's going to be put on y'all. So where is the time to build in for like some, you know, whether it's political education or just capacity building or resource sharing, you know, it's just going to be a whole new type of environment we have to work through. The next question definitely ties to that. How do you balance meeting people's immediate needs through the work that you're doing with this larger long-term goal of systemic change? And that's a huge question.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's no right or wrong answer to this.
Well, firstly, I'm a really big boundaries person. I think that that's a very important thing to be comfortable doing when you're in organizing, or even when you're engaging with others, like building friendships and things like that. You have to be comfortable setting boundaries and standing on them. And so when I'm doing my work with certain groups, some of my peers will just anything you ask me for, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna drop everything and do it. And
yeah, people pleasing.
And that creates a negative situation. They don't realize it's a negative situation. And so oftentimes I try to, one, I'm not just going to give you the thing just because you want the thing.
Right.
And so, for example, we have some people who they don't have a job and they're low on money, but they have an apartment. And so we will give them money. They'll pay whatever they paid for. And then the next month they're like, hey, I'm 3 months behind on my rent. I'm like, you were just 3 months behind on your rent.
Yeah.
So something's going on. So we need to talk about this and figure this out, because we can't just keep giving you money. And there's also a thing of, I'm really big on helping people be able to know where to look for stuff so that they don't just rely on one person or one org, because there's no guarantee that person or org is always going to be there or always going to have the resources to be able to do something for you. And I don't want you to be stuck because the person that you constantly were relying on can't do anything. And so one big thing that I always do is, when someone like asks me for something, I'm like, okay, here, these are the resources of where you can find this stuff for long term, and I can walk you through it. I can help you figure it out, but I'm not just gonna like just continually hand you stuff, because I want you to be able to, if I'm not here, if I can't answer the Instagram DMs right now, if I can't do XYZ, I don't want you to be hurt. I don't want you to be kicked out. I don't want you to da-da-da, right? And I think that that's one area of how I can balance things so people understand the levels to stuff and how it's not as individual as they may feel like it is because they're the individual going through it. And then after that, I'm a talker, in case you haven't noticed. And I do like to educate people on the systems that cause some of the situations they're going through and the systems that cause some of the situations they're observing so that they understand that there's like levels to this stuff and where the things are coming from to avoid what can happen with some minoritized vulnerable populations, which we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, where when they don't know where their oppression is coming from, they'll kind of result to blaming blaming horizontally. And so because I don't know how this is working up here, this is your fault. Right. This is your fault that you're on SNAP and I work 60 hours a week and I can't afford food. How come you can eat food?
Right.
It's like both of y'all should be able to eat food. Right. That's not their fault. So I want to make sure that people understand where that's coming from so that they don't fall into those traps. And I think that that does help with the systemic level of things, because when it so comes for things to get toppled or things to change, people are at least a bit educated on it and so are more available to be on board with those large level changes and to like expand their imagination on what we can build afterwards.
Right. Yeah, it'd be great if there was like 20 Folasades like out here organizing, right? But it's even better that other people are kind of stepping up more into their power. And I feel like that's the like highlight I think we see when working with each other, because like even youth, like Genesis, you're in high school, like getting to see you like shy at first, but like building your own political analysis based on like our like different lived experiences, because everyone has a different story, right? Because I feel like that, and you talked about it earlier, kind of this dual approach of like one foot in your education you're getting, whether it's from school or class, but then your other foot that has to be rooted in your lived experience and the people around you, that like street smarts, right? Do you feel like you're developing that too, or do you see it kind of growing?
Yeah, I can see it like growing, because what we're talking about right now, like some of this stuff, like I didn't really know much about like 2 years ago. But now that I'm like doing this and like talking to more people, then I can actually feel like the other perspectives are like of what they got through. My other question is, you also work in Rethink 35, challenging the highway expansion through a racial and environmental justice lens. What connects transportation policy to health and housing equity in your eyes?
I view it as being hand in hand, like very directly related to one another for multiple reasons. One reason is that how we move around and where we lay our head are directly correlated. The second thing is that in city design and city planning, oftentimes how transportation is going to move does impact how certain neighborhoods are interacted with or treated. And so when cities decide, oh, this neighborhood is a neighborhood that I'm okay with, with casting to the side, then anytime they're going to do some kind of expansion, they're cool with these people having to move, and they're going to figure out how we can not have to hit those people over there. And so oftentimes you'll see that some of our highway expansions are fine with tearing down the short stop next to Fiesta, or making the people who own the Ethiopian restaurant move, or just blasting through the Alexander family farm or things like that. But they're gonna make sure they don't hit nobody in Terrytown. They're gonna make sure that they don't run through Hyde Park. They're gonna make sure that Westlake is good, because there's that priority in that where people are housed that impacts how the transportation is done. As far as the value of that in organizing, I think that a lot of times, to be completely frank, in the transportation justice space, it is, and the housing justice space, it tends to be very dominated by people who aren't really impacted by these types of systems. And so the way they organize around them can be inadvertently very harmful. And so I approach the highway fighting and stuff like that through the racial justice lens. The organization does not. I do. and a couple other people in there do, but the org itself doesn't. And that's just because a lot of the people don't have that experience.
Yeah.
And because they don't have that experience, they still have that blocker on where they don't recognize the value in certain things. They don't recognize the harm in certain stuff. They may or may not still be like, oh, well, they just believe that certain thing. Like, that doesn't make them a racist. And it's like, no, it does. Like,
sorry to be that person, but everything does tie back to racism.
yeah. It's like they're just because they're not like, because most racists are not going to be out here calling people slurs and like physically harming people. They're going to be like pushing rhetoric and pushing policies. And so, yeah, it does make them racist. And so I think that recognizing how things relate to one another is really valuable to being able to positively impact the areas, especially on like both the policy level and on the human to human engagement level. And the last thing that I think I want to say about that is, even though some people may be in a certain niche of organizing, it's important to recognize that you don't necessarily have to organize around the other areas that impact the area that you organize in. Because if you're transportation justice, you don't have to now be in housing justice, but you do have to
acknowledge and address those things that affect one another.
Yeah. And you have to like give due to that. And I think that a lot of people are kind of unwilling to do that presently.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's a lot of silos, because I've been living in Austin for like 10 years, and I work for the city on like a lot of sustainability, environmental things. And you're right. Like, I was talking to people that would just say crazy things of how they do their planning for transportation access and such, or like, this is a great idea. It's like, no, it's not. I could just tell that from people I'm talking to and like what the reality is. And unfortunately, like the people that fill positions, like policy positions, like they're privileged enough to have go to school for that specifically. And like urban planners did a lot of racist shit of how we got to where we got to, like you're mentioning, of like the environmental justice history. And I like that you pointed out too, like we can work in like various nonprofits, but a lot of it's really your own political analysis that shows up when you're like organizing and talking to people. That I feel like sometimes people don't separate themselves from that. They're like, I'm part of this org and this is what our stance is. And it's like, I feel like it's a lot nuanced than that. Do you really agree with that? You know what I mean? I feel like that's a whole other, that could be a whole podcast episode.
No, yeah.
About the real tea. What kind of Austin do you really hope to see in the next 10 to 20 years, especially for Black and historically excluded communities on the East Side?
On the most basic level, in Austin that values the vulnerable communities. I do love Austin, but one of the drawbacks is oftentimes that Austin does not value its minoritized communities, its vulnerable communities, the people who they feel aren't really bringing in the money. They don't value them as much.
Profit interests. Right?
They'll mess everybody over to make sure that Susie Q, who's coming in for ACL, has a good experience.
There's shuttles.
Yeah.
Free shuttles.
Yeah. And so I want an Austin that earnestly values those communities to the point where they're willing to protect them and listen to them. In the same way that whenever XYZ wealthier area is like, oh, we want to be protected from this, we don't want y'all to interact with us, and the city's like, okay. When this community is like, hey, I don't want you coming in and taking our houses from us, the city should be all like, we're going to actually hear you out on that, instead of being like, that sounds very NIMBY of you. I don't think you should say that. So that value is something that I really appreciate. And I think that having that on the base level could positively influence a lot of the other aspects that people want to come out of the interaction with the city.
So true.
What keeps you grounded and motivated when progress feels slow or resistant feels strong?
Really just interactions with people. I know that because these are systemic issues, oftentimes I'm not going to really see the big systemic solutions come along from my work, or even the work of like the specific orgs that I'm working with. But being able to see the one-to-one interactions, having somebody come back and be like, hey, I followed that thing that you told me to go to, and now I have a bus pass.
Yeah.
Or now I got my ID. That feels good to me. Or like hearing my sister come back and be like, yeah, someone said da-da-da-da-da, and that I remember when you told me how that's like a harmful thing to say, and so I told them, and I'm like, yeah. That kind of stuff just on a basic level, I think, really motivates me because I'm very much of a people person. So that 1-to-1, 2-to-1 type of situation.
Yeah. I feel like that's what we all need. I know Misael talked about in like an episode some back about like how the COVID pandemic changed a lot of things, of how people responded or were in community with one another. I feel like that's a good grounding reminder, and you mentioned this earlier, like the power of just listening. Like you don't have to show up and like organize, right? People think of like, oh, how do I get more involved? And they think of it like an action and like a leadership as being outspoken and like this activist role. But I feel like, and I don't know if you resonate with this, but for me, like I said, I've been here 10 years. I didn't start like, I think I was doing organizing like at my college, but I think how I got to where I'm at now, getting way, way more involved in like leadership, it took me like almost 10 years since living in Austin. It took me almost 10 years to listen to folks from here, to listen to the different perspectives, because you'll hear crazy things. You'll hear like, that's true and that's true. Like they could both be true at once. And then you also are listening and building your own, like as a student, your own analysis that we've been talking about, right? Like your own experience. So I feel like that's kept me grounded of just like, it takes time and like how we show up for each other and experience it. Do you also want to share how you feel grounded with how it's a lot as a student going through all this stuff? How do you feel like you stay grounded, or
how I'm doing this? Like it's making me informative about like what we're doing, and I can also like tell other people like what Folasade is doing, what you're doing, like what everybody is doing for the community, where they can get the resources, like where they can get the information from. For me, like that's growing, you know.
Yeah, your self-awareness.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's like, I feel like you're 16. When are you gonna turn 17?
Yeah.
When?
Oh wait. When?
When's your birthday?
This year.
This year. Like this such a coming of age of like a lot of realizations and self-awareness, and that's not gonna stop till like forever.
Yeah. It's like you grow more older and like you learn more. On to my next question for me. What would you hope to see more of in organizing space in Austin?
Off of that, more self-awareness, a lot of times people aren't willing to admit certain things about themselves or about how they interact with certain people, and it can negatively impact their ability to really build with one another, because they're constantly, either they're going to come at it's always your fault whenever things go off the wall, or they're going to come off the thing of whatever I'm doing is always the right thing to do. And so we see a lot of people who are adverse to criticism. They get really upset about it, and then they rally people against the people that are criticizing them, instead of just sitting down and recognizing, maybe I didn't realize, and even if the person who's criticizing you was wrong, but still that's like a perspective that some people are having, and you have to address that. So I think that self-awareness is something that I really would appreciate seeing. And then the ability to accept criticism and the ability to be truly introspective, I think would be a lot more valuable in the Austin space. And then all of those combined with the listening thing I talked about earlier would really make for a more robust, more impactful, more connected organizing space in the city.
Yes, I agree with you 110%. Because there's always that fear of conflict, and like we can be very like people. I don't know about we or me, but I don't know. It shows up in everyone, right? To some certain extent, people can be very like fear of criticism, and they're like, I'm voting this way, so I'm right, or I'm aligning, like I feel good. But it's like you gotta kind of know for yourself. Yeah. You gotta learn for yourself. You gotta go listen to what other folks are involved with, and like really decide for yourself, how do things make you feel. Like don't go off of what you hear about, or I mean, you should always be self-aware and like listen to what people might warn you about when getting involved in certain things. But over time, like trusting your instincts of how things make you feel. And if you're like the only person that's speaking up, that doesn't mean that you're wrong. Sometimes maybe 5 other people wanted to say what you said, but didn't feel safe enough or confident enough to do that, because the loudest person in the room is not always right. Which I feel I've learned. So I think this is our kind of last question, but might touch on a number of different things. But, you know, you've talked about having firm boundaries in organizing or getting involved in advocacy work. You talked about having real talk being honest, communicating like effectively. You talked about having self-awareness. These are all great interpersonal skills beyond just organizing skills, right? All of us could learn from. But what's one practical step that people can take to support community health and environmental justice where they live?
So the most practical step that I often recommend people, because I work with unhoused people so much, is having bottles of water or bottles of those weird electrolyte drinks that they recently started coming out with. I think they do good things. Or like a little box of granola bars, gummy worms, whatever,
Just pick up a
in
little
your car,
extra, right?
so that when you go by and you're driving and there's an unhoused person on the side of the road, you can just like hand them something that would be beneficial for them, and then go on your way. Especially because a lot of people don't carry cash now. So I'm not gonna ask you to have a wad of cash with you. Like,
Dude, people they don't even give cash back anymore.
Yeah.
Lately, which I feel is really messed up.
yeah. So like in my car, I have a box of granola bars and raisins, just because I had a lot of raisins, that I can give out to people. And oftentimes people really appreciate that. I used to have those Prime drinks, but I ran out of those because people liked them. And so just stuff like that is the most practical way. But after that, I would say, not to refrain, but really listening and observing the things that are going on in your community and treating everyone around you with the base level of the golden rule. Treat people how you want to be treated. Be respectful to everyone. And so if there's an unhoused person that comes up to you and you're at the window for whatever trendy coffee shop just opened again, then be like, hey, you want something? Like, and get y'all both. Because I know most of these people can afford it. Like, they have like $3,000 Pilates classes and stuff. You can afford an extra coffee. So doing stuff like that, I think, would just make things a better place.
Pass it forward.
Yeah, treating people better, being kinder to people.
Cool. Is there anything else you would like to plug or share?
Do I look at the camera?
Oh, yeah.
Is it this one?
Yeah,
that one.
So I just like to reiterate that Queertopia is doing the meal train. And if it is still going on at the time in which this is posted, you can find the link in the Queertopia Instagram, Queertopia TX. Sign up, buy a gift card, give us $10, whatever you can do, or just share it. We'd really appreciate it, and it'd really help for us to be able to make sure some people get fed.
Thank you so much, and thank you to DAWA Studios for hosting us for another episode at the DAWA headquarters and for making this podcast a reality. I think we've had amazing speakers so far, and we want to continue to collaborate and do more. So shout out to DAWA.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.